Recording in progress.
Colleagues, if you could take your seats, please. I'm going to recognize Councilor Baker to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council. We are being both audio taped and videotaped. Remotely at this time, I have Councilors Gentile and Vice President Kalis. And we are going to proceed with our first call list, and then we're going to go on. There are two items on second call. Actually three, but two are related. When we get to the first two, I'll briefly explain where we are procedurally. Then I'll recognize Chair Kelly. The second item, third item on second call is a real property reuse item that Councilor Danberg at the appropriate time will report out. I hope to discuss and I hope to vote on this evening. So for first call, Chair Kelly for the Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. First call. The Land Use Committee met on February 25th. We took up item 29-25, which was a request to allow retaining walls exceeding 4 feet in height at 10 Nonantum Street. That was approved unanimously, 8-0. Also, item number 30-25, which was a request to allow an oversized internal accessory apartment at 2077 Washington Street. Also approved unanimously, 8-0. We did a couple of reappointments to the Boston College Neighborhood Council. The first was 36-25, reappointing Corrine Alexander, approved 8-0. And the second was 37-25, reappointing Kenneth Lyons. That was also approved 8-0. Then we took up item number 480-24, which is on second call tonight, and 481-24 also on second call.
Thank you very much, Chair Kelly. We've been joined by Councilor Downs at large from Ward 5. So we have a full complement of the City Council here, both individually and remotely. Chair Baker for Zoning and Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I only have two items before the council tonight. All the items were held, but I would like to assign a public hearing for item 2825 on page 45 for March 24th, 2025, and also ask for suspension of the rules to accept a late filed item number 5225 on page 53.
All in favor of suspending the rules to allow for a late filed item, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Chair Baker. Next, for programs and services, I have Chair Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think there is no report tonight.
Thank you. For public safety and transportation, Chair Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report begins on page 47. The first item, 19-25, was held, but I want to mention it anyway because it was a very excellent discussion regarding the proposed plaza in Newton Center with some really thoughtful public comment and feedback from our administration and counselors, which I really appreciated all around. And that was held 7-0. 31-25, requesting a discussion and possible amendment to the Traffic Council regulations to allow for an appeal on field trials, was approved 5-2. With that, I move the report.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. For the Public Facilities Committee, Chair Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. We met on February 19th, and item 2325 was is docketed by the Community Preservation Committee, recommending authorization to appropriate and expend $1,471,000 and authorize obligation of borrowing against an equal amount for the rehabilitation of the basement of the Jackson Homestead and Museum as authorized by General Laws 44B for a period of 10 years. And I think I won't read the whole docket item, but that was approved by Public Facilities 8-0. 324-24, Councilors Lucas, Milredo, Malachi, Greenberg, Humphrey, Farrell, Getz, Leary, Kalis, Lipoff, Danberg, and Lobovitz, requesting a discussion with the Department of Public Works regarding public and private stormwater mitigation to improve flooding that can result from the city's capital improvement projects to reduce inflow and infiltration within the sewer system. That was voted no action necessary, 8-0. 347-24, Councilors Kalis, Lipoff, Malachi, Albright, Getz, Laredo, Lucas, Greenberg, Danberg, Lobovitz, and Farrell, requesting a discussion with ISD and engineering as a possible ordinance amendment to better understand the details how water movement moves from one property to another, how it's assessed, monitored, and tracked over time. This was voted also no action necessary, 8-0. Both of these last two items are going to be replaced by a new docket item. 42-25, Her Honor the Mayor requesting a discussion with Public Facilities Committee regarding the proposed 5-year contract for curbside collection and recycling processing commencing on July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2030. This was also voted no action necessary after a very excellent discussion, and I move the report.
Thank you, Chair Albright. Next, I have Chair Gentile for the Finance Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The finance report begins on page 49. First item is 23-25. The Community Preservation Committee recommending authorization to appropriate and expend $1,471,000 and to authorize general obligation borrowing. And its second recommendation, which was to appropriate $204,000 in Community Preservation Act funding from the unrestricted prior year funds for work in the basement of the Jackson Homestead and Museum. This item was approved by a vote of 7-0. Next item, 38-25, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend $109,930 from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for Waste Reduction. That is a grant. 39-25, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $50,000 earmarked in the FY25 Massachusetts state budget for sidewalk improvements around Underwood Elementary School. This was approved 7-0. Top of page 50, 40-25, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $35,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and the Department of Fire Services for mobile radios and repeaters for the fire department vehicles, approved 7-0. 41-25, Her Honor the Mayor requesting approval to enter into a 5-year contract for curbside collection. This was approved 7-0. And the final item to report out is 43-25. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend $200,000 from the city's allocation of rideshare funds to supplement the funding for the Nahanton Street Pedestrian Improvements Project. And this also was approved by a vote of 7-0, and I would move the report.
Thank you, Chair Gentile. Chair Danberg for real property reuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was one item, the Real Property Reuse Committee met on Thursday, February 27th. Item number 205-24, that item is on second call.
Thank you, Chair Danberg. With that, our Clerk Moore, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
I accept for item number 3125 on page 47, which I vote no.
Thank you. Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye, with the exception of 31-25, for which I vote no.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 24-0 with the exception of item 31-25 for 22 yeas, 2 nays, 0.
Thank you very much. We're going to now turn to our second call items. I'm going to recognize Chair Kelly from the Land Use Committee to report out the first 2 items. And I think Chair Kelly, you can do this together. And I understand you're probably going to have a motion along with it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes to all 3 of those points. As I said during first call, the Land Use Committee met on February 25th and took up docket item number 48-09-24, which was a request to rezone 386 to 390 Watertown Street from business use 2 to mixed use 4. The motion to approve failed with votes of 3 in favor, 4 opposed, and 1 abstention. We then took up the related item number 481-24, requesting a special permit for a 4-story mixed-use building with 13 residential units, homeownership condominiums between 694 and 1,130 square feet each, and 14 at-grade parking spaces. The motion to approve the special permit also failed with a tied unsuccessful vote of 4-4. In conjunction with these 2 votes, we also voted to correct the address of this docket item to 386-390. It was previously listed as -394 Watertown Street, which was approved unanimously. This location was before the City Council previously and approved for a 10-unit, 3-story project in 2017. The site has been empty for many years in between then and now. There was no consensus among the Land Use Committee members on these items, with votes basically split. A similar lack of consensus was reflected in the speakers at the public hearing. 20 members of the public spoke, 8 in person, 13 on Zoom, according to my count. 10 were in favor and 10 were opposed. The big picture comments from, I'm just going to summarize, from the city councilors, there were lots of smaller comments on individual items, particulars, but the big ones were ranging from support for the zone change, agreeing with the unanimous decision by the Planning and Development Board, saying it was a good fit for MU4 due to the mix of residential and business that will add to the vitality of this village center, to the opposition saying the opposite. It was not a good fit. And some asked for financial details about the project to prove that a 10-unit building will not be financially viable. There were concerns over setting a precedent for higher density development as a result of the project. Some believe that today's financial reality in construction justifies the increase in units. Others did not believe the need expressed by the petitioners. A question was asked about the appropriateness of the City Council making zone changes along with special permits. City Solicitor Jonah Temple from the Law Department reiterated that this is a legal protocol under the 2 forms of jurisdiction that the City Council has, both legislative and quasi-judicial. Until another system is created, this is the approved way we handle these requests. And is now the time that you would like?
You can make
hear
your
from me?
motion, Chair Kelly, and then I'm just going to offer a brief explanation and then we'll vote on it.
I would move that we would send this back to the Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. I'm going to ask for a second on the motion. Second by Councilor Lobovitz. Let me just try to provide a little bit of procedural perspective as to why Chair Kelly has suggested we recommit to the Land Use Committee. First of all, the intent, if we recommit, is to take this up tomorrow night. No further delay, tomorrow night. Chair Kelly's talked to the developer about that, petitioner, excuse me. And if it comes out of committee favorably or unfavorably, we'll take it up at our next meeting on the 17th. I personally was prepared to have us discuss and debate this evening. It's a contested matter, but that's what we do here. What I will say, though, is we learned very late today, close to the start of this meeting, that there'd been a transfer of title to the real estate. Transfer of title was from the original petitioner, Mr. Mule as a trustee, to the entity owned by the developer with whom he is affiliated. Transfers are not uncommon in real property matters, but in order to have an appropriate council order, we need some, at the very least, some paperwork filed by the developer, reviewed by our legal department to make sure that if we do issue an order here, that the order is done properly. And so after conferring with Chair Kelly and speaking to Attorney Temple earlier this evening, we came to the conclusion that it would be better off to send it back to committee, because regardless of how you feel about this item, you want to make sure it's voted on properly. We do not want to have any procedural defects in our work. So that's the explanation for why it's going back to committee. No other reason. There may be other things people wish to discuss, but my rationale for sending it back is so we get this procedurally right. And the floor of the council is not the place to make those kind of changes, particularly when the documents in question require at least some legal review in order to make sure they're appropriate. So with that, I'll recognize anyone else who wishes to be heard on the motion at this time. Councilor Block, Leary, Lucas, on the motion only. That's it.
Yes, Mike, it's really more a question for the chair. How does the public hearing, how is the public hearing affected by this motion to recommit? Thank you.
That's going to be the discretion of the chair. She'll make a decision whether she wants to reopen the public hearing or not. That's how we function in land use. Councilor Leary and then Lucas.
In Gentile.
Thank you, Mr. President. My only question is regarding the how quickly that it's coming back to land use, which I'm fine with. But
Well,
in terms of making sure that the public knows about it and all that, that's my
So-
question.
I was probably maybe Councilor Kelly and I were too eager in our hope that we could take this up tomorrow night, because our clerk is kindly reminding me that we have an open meeting law, 48-hour notice. So I
Right.
think we're going to have to do this, I assume next week. I'll leave it to Chair Kelly to do
I
this.
suggested next week, the 11th, actually, and
I'm going to defer to Chair Kelly to talk to the petitioner to make sure we can get this done. Obviously, we'll provide notice to the council in the proper fashion. We'll notify the public. Very good question. And I spoke out of turn. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for correcting me.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr.
All
President.
right. Councilor Lucas.
You got to give credit to Councilor Block. He stole my question. So it's up to the discretion of the chair.
It is
Thank you.
up to the discretion of the chair. All right. Anybody else in the motion to recommit?
Councilor Gentile.
I'm sorry, Councilor Gentile. Go ahead, please.
So on the motion, but I will say just another misstep in a long line of missteps of this project. But my question is, where are we on the calendar as far as when we have to vote this out so that we don't have, if it's still allowed, a constructive approval? Do we have plenty of time?
We do. The clerk has assured me that it's somewhere in mid-May.
Somewhere in mid-May?
Yeah, we just closed the public hearing a week ago.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So we have time to do our work and we're not going to run into time constraints, but thank you for alerting us to that. Always a consideration for land use matters. All right, anybody else? I am comfortable. You want to do this in a voice vote? Can we do this in a voice mode? All in favor of sending both items back to committee at a meeting to be scheduled hopefully next week in compliance with the open meeting law, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. It goes back to committee. We have one more item this evening, real property reuse. I'm going to recognize Chair Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report begins on page 50. This item is on second call. Real property reuse met on Thursday, February 27th, 2025. Present were Councilors Lucas, Getz, Gentile, Malachy, Oliver, Lipoff, myself, Councilor Dan Berg, Chair, and Councilor Laredo was absent. There was one item on the agenda, number 205-24, reuse of a parcel of land on Chestnut Street. And I will read the item. It is short. Director of Planning and Development submitting on April 8, 2024, a letter stating that the 8 parking places on city-owned property at 25 Chestnut Street in West Newton Square be made available for sale or lease pursuant to the City of Newton Ordinances Section 2-7. The background on this item, the disposition of it was that Councilor Gentile moved for sale of the spaces, made a motion for the sale to the building purchaser. The committee voted 4-3 in favor of the sale, with Councilors Oliver, Getz, and Lucas opposed, and with Councilor Laredo not voting in absent. A little background on this that I think you would need to have. Since 1984, the city, with the consent of the Newton Police Department, has leased the portion of its 14 parking places found on the north side of the annex property at 25 Chestnut Street in West Newton to the owner of the property at 1 Chestnut Street. The property leased to Bank of America has been vacant since 2022. The lease provided 14 spaces, 6 of which are on wholly owned city land. 8 spaces are located 69% on city land and 31% on private property. Can the clerk put a map up that shows that? It was in the report. The term of the initial lease was 20 years, and it was extended 10 years in the year 2004 and another 10 years in 2014 for a total of 40 years. The lease ended in September of 2024. Now, of the 14 spaces, which is the 8 that you see up there lined in red and blue, plus another 6, that the Newton Police Department has determined that it will retain the use of the 6 spaces located entirely on city land. And Chief McMains has said that they will make available the 8 spaces in divided ownership available for either sale or lease as the city council sees fit. The prospective owner of the property at 1 Chestnut, which is Hilliard's Chocolates, which has an executed purchase and sale agreement with the current owner, plans to establish a retail chocolate store in the building at 1 Chestnut Street. The public has reacted very enthusiastically to the prospect of Hilliard's opening in this location. The city is not a party to this transaction. They need to be able to, the Hilliard's needs to be able to execute an agreement for these spaces in time for them to be able to open in the fall so that they can be in business for the holiday season. If not, it does not make sense for them to go through with this purchase. Hilliard's purchase and sale agreement is contingent on the 8 parking places that they now own 31% of, as shown on the map. So the top section included in blue is owned by the building owner and would pass to Hilliard's if they purchase the building. And the bottom outlined in red belongs to the city. That is 69% city and 31% for the building. The Hilliard's would like to purchase the 8 spaces and has agreed on the price, which is has been set by the assessor of $276,000. The assessor on valuation for sale at a cap rate of 8.5%. A sale valuation of $50,000 per space, applying the city's 69% ownership of the 8 spaces, makes the total value $400,000 of those 8 spaces. The resulting valuation of the 69% owned by the city comes to the $276,000 that I mentioned. Under a lease valuation, the assessor has determined that the average monthly rent for one parking place in that location is $375 a month, or $4,500 a year per space, or $36,000 a year for 8 spaces, or applying the city's 69% ownership to the 8 spaces, a yearly total lease amount valued at $24,840. The charge of the Real Property Reuse Committee on the 27th of February was to decide whether to sell or lease the property and set the minimum financial terms. There are 4 things that the Real Property Reuse Committee could have instructed the mayor to do: sale, lease, transfer to another apartment, or do nothing, in which case the spaces would stay with the police department and Hilliard's would have no use of the spaces. At the February 27th Real Property Reuse meeting, the Director of Planning, Heath, gave a presentation that outlined the prices and the logic for the sale or lease. Chief McMahon's was comfortable, again, with either sale or a lease. It was the committee's job to decide on sale or lease as a recommendation to the mayor. The mayor, following the city council's direction to her, will decide who will purchase and on what terms. The mayor may not decide to sell if the city council votes to lease, nor to lease if the city council decides to sell. She may decide to do nothing, as I explained before, and the purchaser won't have any use of the space. At the public hearing, the committee heard from the public that was and they were entirely in favor of Hilliard's Chocolates occupying the building. They were very enthusiastic about it. Some argued for sale, and one person argued for keeping the spaces for public access, which is not one of the options on the table. I need for you to understand that. After in-committee discussion of sale versus lease, Councilor Gentile moved for sale of the spaces to the building purchaser with a right of access over the city parking lot for $276,000, or 67% of the total $400,000 assessment. The committee voted 4 and 3 in favor of sale, with Councilors Oliver, Getz, and Lucas opposed, and Councilor Laredo absent. That concludes the report. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, because I know that was a lot of information for me to give you.
So thank you, Chair Danberg, for a very thorough report. I'm going to remind colleagues, this is an item that we need a two-thirds vote or 16 votes to approve either sale or lease. Right now, we have the sale proposal before us. That's the proposal that was voted out of committee. I'm going to accept any and all comments. I'm going to urge us, though, whatever we do, that we try to get this resolved in council this evening and not delay further. Whether it's a sale or a lease or some other disposition, we should decide, because it's not fair to the petitioner to delay further. They have legitimate business needs to try to move forward. So I'm just going to preface any comments that folks have with that observation. With that, anyone wish to speak? Councilor Lipoff, Baker. I'm sorry, Councilor Lucas, you did put on second call. You get to go first, then Councilor Lipoff, then Councilor Baker.
Gentile.
On Gentile. I'll do my best. It's hard to keep everybody in line.
Thank you, President Laredo. So yes, I put this on second call. I voted against Counselor Gentile's motion. And I just want to explain my vote. And that is, it's nothing against Hilliard's Chocolate. I do want them to open. I want people to visit their store and buy chocolate and anything else that they sell. That is my preferred preference for the site. But we are tasked with to decide to sell or lease. And I voted against it because I prefer to lease the 8 parking spaces as opposed to selling them. So I put it on second call so I could make a motion to amend the recommendation from the committee to from sale to lease. So I'm making that motion now.
So there's a motion by Counselor Lucas to amend from sale to lease. Is there a second? Counselor Malachy, we are going to discuss the motion, although I think involved in discussing the motion is probably discussing the merits themselves. Counselor, yes.
Can I speak to the motion?
You may speak to the motion. I thought you had spoken, but go right ahead. Keep going.
No, thank you, President Laredo. So can I just ask the clerk to put the draft council order up on the screen, please? Yes. Okay, there it is. So, yes, the draft council order is a lease to sell the is to lease the 8 parking spaces. It is a 50-year lease, and it is still $24,840 per year. The reason why I believe the lease is better than the sale is because the city, if we lease it, still maintains some control over the site. If we were to sell the 8 parking spaces, there is nothing stopping Hilliard's Chocolate, and I hope they don't do it, but there is nothing stopping them from selling that particular land, including the 8 parking spaces, to a third party. There is nothing that prevents that. If Hilliard's Chocolate, for some reason, can't continue in that site, we still maintain control over those 8 parking spaces, or our portion of the 8 parking spaces. That is why I put this on second call, and that is why I believe leasing is better. It's also only $24,000 a year, as opposed to a one-time payment of $276,000 a year. Over the course of 50 years, that is more money to the city than if we were to sell it. That is the other reason why I believe leasing is better than selling. So it's on the table. Let's have a nice discussion about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Lucas. I have Counselor Lipoff next.
Thank you. I agree with Counselor Gentile that there should be a sale. We're talking about this motion, but I'm going to talk in generalities here. I have 2 hats to wear. As a city councilor, I came to this saying we should lease it. We should keep control because the police next door use those spaces. And then my real estate appraisal and consulting hat says that if I was Hilliard's, I would definitely want to control those. They really need those spaces. They're not public spaces. They're spaces that, because it's on their land and they would buy that, they would control them. All those spaces being used would allow other spaces to be open in West Newton. So it's a win-win for everybody. But the control of those spaces being 31% already in ownership, and the fact that they deserve to control those for a successful business. We want West Newton to be successful. We want the businesses to thrive. Ultimately, I do not want to see us pass on this. I really would like to see a purchase. It's clean. It's what this business deserves. ultimately, if we have to go lease because 16 votes are a lot to be had, I think everybody would be happy with that as well. I just want to be good to this business and to be good to West Newton. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Lipoff. Counselor Baker.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation of both sides. I find myself sympathetic to the motion to substitute leasing simply because I think it does involve the maintenance of control, the use of that site, not just for these spaces, but immediately adjacent is important. And while there is always going to be some difficulty of enforcement, I think the enforcement opportunities, especially if the lease covenants provide for it, will enable us to make sure that the parcel adjacent, which is used by the city for its own needs, maintains open space use, parking use for the city's needs rather than being a spillover site for the business as much as we'd like them to succeed. So I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you, Counselor Baker. Counselor Gentile.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I certainly can't add anything factually to the report that was given by the chair, which was extremely thorough and hit on all of the salient major points. Secondly, I want to agree with your earlier statement that in order to hopefully facilitate a new family business coming into West Newton, that we should try and resolve this one way or another tonight, because it has been around for a while and there are business decisions to be made. As for my motion to sell, I still have no idea why the city entered into this arrangement or this agreement back in 1984. But I think that most of us, if not all of us, can agree that setting up an area with parking spaces where a private entity owns 1%, a certain percentage, and a public entity such as the city of Newton own the remaining amount is not typical. It is certainly not something that you would strive to do initially, as we did in 1984. It makes absolutely no business or real estate sense. And that is why I have been suggesting that we sell this as opposed to continue leasing it and continue the arrangement that we have right now, which doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. So that was the reason for the sale. I mean, we can argue about the return to the city. I think that by setting the minimum price at $276, we are certainly doing our job of making sure that the taxpayers of Newton are getting good value for the 69% that would be transferred. As Council Lipoff mentioned, it's a heck of a lot cleaner to sell. We can redraw the lines. It's clear as to who owns what. It's a logical setup. It's easy to understand. I think that is a plus. There's some screwy things that could happen under the current arrangement. Okay, I don't really want to.
Counselor Gentile, you're out of time. Do you
Just
want
give me
more time?
2 minutes, please.
All right, all in favor of suspending the rules to allow for additional 2 minutes for Counselor Gentile, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Go ahead, please.
We think that we know what will happen if things are leased, but there are some screwy things that could happen the way that the land is deployed right now, where some lines could be drawn and spaces achieved that would get far less, but the owners of 25 Chestnut could do right now And I don't even want to see that be, a possibility. So, I understand that people seem to think that they're going to have some kind of control over these spaces by leasing it, but we're talking about a 50-year lease here. I don't understand what control we think that we're getting. Nothing will change. So again, I just want to speak in support of the sale versus the lease, but hopefully we can resolve this tonight so that the folks that are trying to enter into a business deal can get it done. And again, I also recognize that there's no guarantee. I mean, we all know who the prospective new owner is. I think it would be great for the city, but there's no guarantee that they will end up, because the mayor still has a major role to play in all of this. But I think it's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm rising to speak in favor of the motion that Councilor Gentile put forth. Having thought about this on both sides of lease or sale, I do believe also that a sale would be the best option for us to make. I think we all agree that this is the kind of business we want to see here. It's small, it's independent in our village center, especially here in West Newton. It'll help with the foot traffic. It'll help bring business to the other businesses that are non-competing. We have empty storefronts there. This 40-year history of having these parking spaces, not just these, but all 14 actually go with the property, indicates to me that at least these 8 spaces should be associated with this business. This complicated ownership of portions of, as I think several Councilor Lipoff and Gentile mentioned, is a very complicated, messy situation, which also indicates that they can't really be turned into the public parking, which, as Councilor Danberg said, is off the table for us tonight anyway. I think for us tonight voting for the sale or lease, the part of why I like the cleanliness and simplicity of a sale is it gives incentive to this potential owner, Hilliard's, to invest in the property. They're here for the long haul. They want to be able to fix up this property, and the lease is more tenuous for them. If it's a sale, they will be able to do what they want to do. They've got some conversion possibilities for the basement and for some of the spaces inside. This dual ownership is just complicated, messy, and confusing. Also, I like that with the sale, we get the immediate revenue to the city. And as some people have said, I think I want us to resolve this tonight, because there's also a time factor here where the potential purchase and sale agreement will expire. It's going to have to go through an RFP process. It's going to take some time. I wish they would be in for the summer, because they're going to have ice cream too. I think when it's hot, we would love them to be there, at least for the fall and winter holidays. So again, I'm going to urge us all to go with the motion that's before us that was presented to Real Property Use and approve a sale of these spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Councilor Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with the things that Councilor Kelly and Councilor Gentile have said. They articulated it very well. I'm not going to repeat them. Just want to clarify something, which I think Councilor Gentile touched on at the end and Councilor Kelly mentioned, which is that we're not actually authorizing a deal to a particular person. And I know you mentioned a petitioner, but really what we're doing is authorizing the city to sell, to dispose of the property, which is through an RFP process. And
We are
anyone is-
authorizing, we are giving authority to the mayor to take an action, whether the mayor chooses to do that or not. Councilor Danberg can correct me if I've misstated something. It's her decision. We're simply authorizing it.
Correct. And if the mayor chooses to exercise that option, it's actually an RFP process that's going to have to be conducted in
Yes.
conformity with public disposal of property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Then for those reasons, I'm going to oppose the motion of my adversary, my colleague, and try to stick with the sale. Thank you.
Thank you as always, Councilor Krinsman. Councilor Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say a couple of additional things about the issue of sale or lease, and that is that we could send this back to real property reuse. Does not make any sense at this point, because the prospective buyer needs to move on this ASAP. It takes a long time to demo and renovate and build out and stock and train your staff and get things up and running. And we need to give him time to be able to do that. My thought about leasing is that if you are leasing the building, then lease the spaces. But if you are selling the building, if the building is being sold and is being owned by someone, which it is, it's in private hands, then why does it make sense to continue the 1984 misstep, as I see as a misstep, of leasing property that the city owns in conjunction with a private entity? I don't know of any other property that the city owns in conjunction with another private entity that we have to agree on leasing our portion of it so that the property can be used to its highest and best use, which in this case is 8 parking places. We are certainly not going to divide the property and say, all right, maybe you could squeeze 2.5 cars into your section, and maybe we could squeeze 3.5 cars into our section. No, this is like asking the city and the prospective owner to enter into a, in this case, suggested 50-year burlap sack race with the city's leg in the building owner's bag, and asking them to continue this race for another 50 years. The city, and again, this is another example of the city furthering its reputation as being unfriendly to business. This should have been done 50 years ago. It was not. They kicked the can down. They did a 20-year lease. We've extended it 10 and 10. It's 40 years later. And now we're going to do this again. And we're going to make it 100 years instead. Well, I would like since the motion to
Counselor Danberg,
substitute the
you're on
lease, 30 seconds more.
Suspend the rules to allow Counselor Danberg to speak for additional 30 seconds. Please say aye. Aye, opposed. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Since the motion to substitute the lease for the sale will come first, I would like to ask Counselor Lucas if he would accept a friendly amendment to extend the lease at least to 99 years instead of 50 years. Would you do that?
Counselor Lucas, through the president.
To extend from 50 to 99?
Yes.
Yes, I would be accepted.
So that is so the motion is to extend for 99 years. We have 4 more speakers who wish to speak. Counselors Maliki, Albright, Grossman, and Farrell in that order. Counselor Maliki, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to note that while I voted in favor of the sale in committee, that was basically because it was the first thing that came before us, and I wanted to make sure we passed something that came to the full council here. But I went into this much more comfortable with the idea of a lease, and having had a few days to think of it and hear from other councilors who are also more comfortable with leasing than the sale, I would like to give everyone the opportunity to vote on that option, which I did not in committee. The reasons I'm more comfortable with the lease are basically as explained by Councilor Lucas. I'm like 98% sure this business is going to be a great success and will do well in West Newton. But nothing is for sure. I actually think it's good that we had the option to look at this now. I don't think that, well, first of all, there's no time advantage to sale versus lease. They both have to go through the same type of RFP process. The idea that it's complicated, that we have this divided property line, it's weird, yeah, but we lived with it for 40 years and nobody really noticed. To me, I think the getting all the money at once, well, it might sound good. I don't think it's necessarily an advantage. I actually like the idea of leasing over time. We could, if a mayor so chose, use the income from the annual lease payments, at least in the early years when we don't have a parking solution for West Newton Square. We could use that money to lease spaces elsewhere in the square. The monthly rent that was arrived at by Mr. Shaughnessy, the chief assessor, by getting quotes from two different property owners in West Newton Square that said they'd be willing to rent spaces at either $350 or $400 a month, and that's how we got the average of $375. So that was a number that had a basis in the current market. The estimated value of the 1,001 square feet was calculated based on that cost to rent. To me, that is a much more theoretical number because, well, we could presumably rent some spaces. I don't think that if we try.
Counselor Maliki, you're out of time. Do you need more
Okay.
time?
30 seconds.
All in favor of suspending the rules to allow Counselor Maliki to speak for additional 30 seconds, please say aye. Aye, opposed, go ahead, please.
I don't think that if we tried to buy 5 spaces, which is what that amount of money would theoretically buy, I don't know that there's anyone in West Newton Square that would want to sell land for that price. So because the 50-year, and if it becomes a 99-year lease, even more so, that is ample amount of time to, it exceeds the requirements that Hilliard's had to be assured of enough time to make their investment worthwhile. I think we're satisfying the objective of getting Hilliard's in there either way, but I think the more prudent thing to do for the city's point of view is to keep our options open for whether it's 50 years down the road or 99 years down the road to.
You're out of time,
Yeah.
Counselor Maliki. All set?
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Next, Counselor Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. So when I first came to Real Property Reuse last week to listen to the meeting, my inclination was to think that leasing was the right way to go. But then when Councillor Gentile proposed the sale and explained why, I thought, that really kind of makes some sense to me. And those of you who I think have been around for a while know that Councillor Gentile and I are often on opposite sides of issues. And sometimes Councillor Gentile gets very annoyed with me for my positions on issues. But here's one where we actually agree with each other. I'm glad we're talking about this being a long-term lease because in a short-term lease would make absolutely no sense. As we were thinking about it earlier today, if it was a 10-year lease and the roof needed fixing and the owner of the building was trying to figure out, well, should I fix the roof, which is like a 30 or 40-year investment? Should I fix the roof or not? If there's only 8 years left on my lease, should I fix the roof? And it would perhaps make no sense to fix the roof. So the longer the lease, if it's going to be leased, the longer the lease, the more it makes sense. I think that we're by going, if it's a long lease, and we all think it should be, I believe, then we're not going to gain anything from this. We're not going to gain the use of these spaces because hopefully Hilliard's will be successful and they'll be there for 99 years, long after we're not sitting in these chairs any longer. And I think we're sort of handcuffing them a bit by saying we have to pay $30,000 a year to rent spaces that they only partially own. It just doesn't make any sense, folks. Perhaps we could have the right of first refusal, as Counselor Lucas said. If we want them to be successful, let's say after 10 years, they want to sell the building. Why can't we put a clause in the agreement that offers the city first, whatever you call the right to first refusal to buy back the spaces at 100% ownership, and stop the silly business of the 1/3, 2/3 ownership? And then that takes care of it. Then the city, if they leave because they want to sell the building, then we have the spaces back if we want them. So I would, if the lease option doesn't succeed, I would ask that we even add that to the proposal that we send to the mayor, that she please ask for right of first refusal to buy the spaces back if they no longer want them.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Two observations. One, I like to think this council can agree and disagree on a variety of issues. That's the beauty of a legislative body like this. In regard to your request, I do not think that is an appropriate thing to be putting in a motion. I think we simply need to either say sale or lease, but certainly this is a public matter. Certainly a request that's reasonable to bring to the attention of the administration. The administration will get the discretion as to whether or not to include that in any agreement.
So I would only add, having been chair of real property reuse back in the day, that we can make recommendations that are not part of the sale or lease. There can be part of a report with a recommendation in it, which is not either sale or lease or the final determination of the.
We can certainly make a recommendation. Right now, we have the motion to lease before us.
Yes.
If you want to try to make a motion to amend at the appropriate time, we can certainly entertain that if people want to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I have Councilors Grossman, Farrell, and Block. Again, we are on the motion, although I think comments are in order on the entire issue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was hoping to ask a question to the chair through the president.
Sure.
Which is essentially, was there discussion in real property reuse about 25 Chestnut Street and what other future purposes the city might want that land for? And the context of my question is that I've served on a few different school working groups. I'm certainly not suggesting this would be an appropriate site for a school, but in other contexts as well, when we were doing the site decision-making for New Cal, for example, the building commissioner's process is to look at every single parcel that the city owns and evaluate it against whatever the city might want to be building or put somewhere or use property for a certain reason. And I'm always very hesitant to let go of any land because we have so many needs. And that's what's hanging me up. And in fact, actually, the 99-year lease makes me a little increasingly worried along those lines. So that's
question through the
question.
president of the
Thank you.
chair of real property, Councilor Danberg.
That was not in the purview of the Real Property Reuse Committee to discuss potential uses of 25 Chestnut Street. It's a valid discussion, but it's for another day.
Councilor Grossman, do you want to add anything?
Just that I'm going to continue to think about it as I listen to others' comments. I don't like the idea of letting go of city property, especially looking at a map like that, carving out something that otherwise is a clean piece of land that the city has, although I agree that the current arrangement is very silly. And I certainly want to see this business be able to come and be successful. So just so everybody knows, if I vote, honestly, I'm really not sure, because if I vote for the lease and it's now a 99-year lease, I don't really know that that solves what I'm worried about. But it's probably better than a sale. But I'm going to just continue to listen. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Grossman. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly can't wait for Hilliard's to open up to go have some of that legendary chocolate. But it occurs to me as you think about this, does a lease allow the city to have greater control of the use of those 8 parking spaces? I mean, with the popularity of dining out, if the parking spaces are owned by Hilliard's, could they in fact set it up as a picnic space for people like me to go eat their chocolate treats instead of using it as parking? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. Is that a question to the chair of real property reuse or more of an observation?
Through you to whomever may be able to answer it. Thank you.
I think it would go to Chair Danberg.
Yes, the answer to that is no. The two options that are on the table are sale to the potential owner of number 1 Chestnut, or lease to the potential owner. Use as public spaces is not one of the options.
All right, I have got Councillors Block, Getz, Mickley. Councillor Gentile, is your hand still up because you want to speak again? No. Okay. So I have Block, Getz, Mickley, and anyone else. If not, we'll then try to wrap it up and vote on the motion. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, I did want to speak again just briefly on Councilor Albright's point
Right.
about resolution.
I'll let you go then in a moment, Councillor
Okay,
Gentile. Go
fine.
ahead, please. Councillor Block.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question, I think, through you to Councillor Lucas. Is the lease anticipated to have annual adjustments to the lease amount? Or is this a flat amount for
I
the?
don't think Councillor Lucas needs to answer that. I think the lease is in the discretion of the administration. The administration will negotiate the terms of the lease, including whether there's annual increase or not. The only issue for us is sale, lease, or don't dispose at all.
The reason I asked that question is I think Councillor Lucas was saying that the lease would be more valuable monetarily to the city. I'm not capable of calculating the present value of a stream of payments, but if it's the same amount every year, I actually don't know if it's advantageous, and I would love to have an answer from anybody who could make it, but there has to be an assumption about whether there are lease adjustments. Thank you.
I'll let, through the president, I'll let Councillor Chair Danberg try to respond to the question.
President Laredo was entirely right in saying.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
In saying that the final terms, including the financial terms of the lease, are always left up to the administration and will be left up to the mayor. In the past, the city has always made those determinations, and the city will do so in this case.
Thank you. Councillor Block, do you want to
Well,
ask another question?
just so that means we don't know the answer to this question about which would be better financially for the city, if that's.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Block. Councillor Getz.
Okay, the top of somewhere.
Would you speak into your
Yeah,
microphone?
no, the top of this fell off. So I will support the amendment to change the terms from the sale to the lease as I had voted out in the reuse committee. I am one that believes that we have control of that land, and I don't view it as parking spaces. I view it as land. So I think of it as being down the road, there will be potentially other uses for that 1,000 square feet of land. So I would have much more a sense of, that this is in fact owned by the city and it's and us. So I think of it as it's not a good idea to sell land in a village center.
Thank you, Councillor Getz. Councillor Mickley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, it seems like opinions on this issue aren't that strong, honestly, either way. And just given that sense, I feel like if we're sort of indifferent, we should just lean towards a direction that's more favorable towards small businesses that we want to attract and bring to Newton, especially if it's a chocolate store that sells ice cream. So I'm going to vote for sale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mickley. Anyone who has not spoken wants to speak before I recognize Councilor Gentile. Councilor Gentile, I think you're out of time. How much time do you need?
Minute and 30.
Well, why don't we go for 2 minutes, Councilor
Great.
Gentile? All in favor of giving Councilor Gentile, suspending our rules to give Councilor Gentile an additional 2 minutes, please say aye. Aye, opposed? 2 minutes, but no more, Councilor Gentile.
So Councilor Getz just made an excellent point that I should have thought to have made, but she did it. And I think she's correct when she's saying we're talking about 1,000 square feet, and we're talking about the city getting $276,000 for it. I think that's a great return, and I would say that's a better financial deal for the city than any kind of a lease arrangement that we would have had in the past or would have going forward. The other point I wanted to make is Council Albright was 100% correct. When it comes to reuse board orders, you know, there's usually one section of the things that we're mandated to do, which is to set to recommend sale, lease, or either one, and to also set a minimum price. But then, I mean, I can see the board order from Crescent Street where we have a second section. I don't know if it's entitled recommendations or resolutions, but that's where we put in things that we ask the mayor to consider because we think it would be good business. So for instance, with Crescent Street, I mean, we went so far as to talk about, you know, a specific number of units, and, you know, the playground and a whole bunch of other things, which is pretty common with real property reuse board orders. So if someone, and Council Albright, you know, mentioned, you know, the mayor recommending to the mayor to take certain actions, I think that we should also take care of that tonight. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Councilor Lucas. I think you got about a minute left, Councilor Lucas.
Oh, thank you. I just got to make one last push and why the lease is better. How many baseball fans do we have here tonight? Baseball? Bobby Bonilla. Anyone know that contract?
Yep.
We're not going to have a back and forth question and answer, Councilor Lucas, so keep on going.
If you know that contract, then you know why leasing is better. It's more money to the city over the long run. I just did the math. The minimum leasing price is $24,840. You do that times 99 years, that's $2.4 million. Over 99 years, it's better than 276 in year one. Baseball.
Councilor Albright, I think you are, I'm going to say a minute, please.
I'm sure I can do this in a minute. I just want to reiterate what Councilor Mickley said. I think we should do what's good for business. This is 1,000 square feet of land, 1,000 square feet of land, which we're selling for $276,000. Or we can sell it for millions of dollars over 99 years. Isn't that great for business? No, it isn't. Come on, guys, let's do the right thing and sell this property.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Councilor Humphrey has not spoken. I'm going to recognize him. I'm then going to really urge us, colleagues, unless someone has something very pressing to say that has not been said before, that we try to vote on the motion. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly prefer Councilor Gentile's option as opposed to this motion. I think this is probably the first time in the time that I've been on the council that I'm actually voting in favor of selling public land. I normally just vote no blanket. I think this is a very odd and unusual situation where there's an existing part ownership of the spaces and overlapping properties, and the spaces as seen on the map clearly are across the property line. I think that is very unusual, in which case that would tend to favor something much more simplified, as I think Councilor Gentile had argued in the committee meeting. And as Councilor Block was alluding to, I think there are some pretty serious present value versus future value of dollars issues when it comes to a lengthy lease. And the assessors calculated their suggestion for a sale price, taking that into account and factoring in that the money is worth less to us 99 or 50 years out from now versus selling it right now. I think also the city is typically not in the business of being a commercial landlord. So it seems a little odd to me that we would start saying, oh, we're now going to start, renting out spaces to businesses in the village centers as part of our, income stream. And I think also this issue isn't really about Hilliard's. I like to, I'd prefer to look at things in abstract, right? What if there is a hypothetical future owner? And I think because of the weirdness of this situation and the part ownership of the spaces, we would probably be having the same conversation with a lot of different potential owners. So I think it's better to just go ahead and resolve it now once and for all. The other thing is I wasn't completely sure on this. Maybe Councilor Gentile knows as chair of finance over many years, but my recollection is that if it were to be longer than a 50-year lease, it probably has to come back again to the council for special permission under state law to have a lease longer than 50 years. I'm not positive on that, but I did just want to flag that as a potential concern here. And again, seems like it would just be simpler to deal with this tonight by selling. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Councilor Lipoff, 1 minute or less, please.
Yeah, 30 seconds, just to build on the wise comments of Councilor Humphrey. The present value of this income stream is accurate for today. And if you think about it, people who win the lottery, they don't take the 30-year payout. They take less money up front because there's so much you can do with that money and it's more valuable today. So if you're thinking about the city's position, that would be the best financial position to have that money today.
All right, Councilor Mickley, I'm indulging you here, but 1 minute or less, please.
Just a number. So if we assume a 4.5% rate of return, which is what treasuries are right now, over 99 years, it's worth $21 million to sell it right now. It's a good deal.
All right. Councilor Wright, you have not been spoken yet, so go ahead, please.
I just have one question. We're going to decide to either sell it or lease it, and that we're giving to the mayor, but the mayor can decide whatever she wants to do.
Through the president of Councilor Chair Danberg.
The mayor, as I explained before, is not able to sell it if we say lease it, and is not able to lease it if we say sell it. The only other thing that she can do at this point is to do nothing.
Okay.
And to keep it in the hands of the police department.
Everybody satisfied? All right. We're going to vote on the motion as amended by Councilor Lucas. The motion, so we're clear, is to substitute a 99-year lease provision for the sale provision. This is a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote to substitute. Hold on. So if you're going to vote in favor of Councilor Lucas's motion, you would vote aye. If you're voting against the motion, you vote nay. If you vote nay, we go back to the original item as stated, which is a sale, and we then vote on that up or down, and that requires a 2/3 or 16-member vote. Point of order or question, Councilor Albright?
I'm concerned, if the lease goes down and if the sale goes down, that leaves us with nothing. So I'm trying to figure out how do we remedy that situation?
I'll recognize Councilor Danberg for that, and I have some thoughts as well, but go ahead, please, Councilor Danberg.
Having tried to anticipate all possibilities, I asked that question of the person who would know, who happens to be sitting in the room at this time, Ms. Moore. And she said that what we could do, since the 2-year inability to bring this back is in our council rules, what we could do would be to redocket the item at the time of the acceptance of the docket item, ask for a suspension of the rules and ask that the docket item be accepted. And the docket item could be
So let
accepted.
me, we could do that, colleagues, but the problem with that, of course, is that could be a considerable delay.
Yes.
Because we have to have a new docket item. It has to go to real property. There's a whole process here. Let me suggest an alternative here, okay? We have Counselor Lucas's motion on the table. I suggest we vote on it up or down. Depending on how that motion goes, then we could accept a motion to modify the existing proposal to allow perhaps for sale or lease or substitute. All right? So let's call the roll on Counselor Lucas's motion. Let's see where we are, then we can proceed. All set? Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Albright.
No.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
No.
Counselor Block.
No.
Counselor Danberg.
No.
Counselor Downs.
No.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
No.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
No.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
No.
Counselor Kalis.
No.
Counselor Kelly.
No.
Counselor Krinsman.
No.
Counselor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff.
No.
Counselor Lobovitz.
No.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
No.
Counselor Oliver.
No.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
No.
Motion fails. 7 yeas, 17 nays.
All right, the main item is before us still. It is the item to sell, not lease, just sell. This is a 2/3 vote. And I think I'm going to recognize Counselor Albright if she wants to make at least a recommendation that would be included with our motion. Counselor Albright? No requirement, but if you do want to add something.
Well, I would like to add my recommendation that if sale wins, if that's where we go, that we recommend to the mayor that she consider adding a clause of right of first refusal if Hilliard's wants to sell his property sometime before the lease is up.
So let me just be clear what the motion is. I'm going to ask for.
Second.
Pardon?
Second.
You jumped ahead of me there. You got to let me at least clarify where we are. So
Okay.
my understanding is it's a resolution that's a recommendation to the mayor that if there is a sale, it includes a right of first refusal in it in connection with a subsequent sale of the property. Did I state that correctly? Okay. Seconded by Counselor Gentile. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Counselor Block?
So this is just for the portion of the property that's currently owned by the city. So we could.
It's the only parcel we have
could
control
re-
over.
We could restore the current awkward situation if we wanted to. That's what you're suggesting as a recommendation. I'm just.
Through the president to
Yes.
Counselor Albright.
Would it be possible to have the clause say right of first refusal for 100% of the parking spaces?
I don't think you could do that because you're talking about property we don't own.
Okay.
I would respectfully suggest that there be a right of first refusal, at least in connection with what we own. I think we should leave it there.
Okay, so
The
that's-
intent is pretty clear though, and I think the intent could be expressed in appropriate draftspersonship. All right? Anyone else? Counselor Lucas?
Thank you. Aren't you glad I put this on second call? So,
We're reconsidering that, Counselor Lucas. Go ahead.
well, the first item was postponed or referred back, so I will support the amendment. And I will support the sale of the land now that the lease failed.
Thank you, Counselor Lucas. Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? All right, seeing none, let's see if we can do the amendment on a voice vote. All in favor of the amendment proffered by Counselor Albright, seconded by Counselor Gentile, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have.
Nay.
Pardon? Was there a nay?
There was a nay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Block, one nay. Two nays, Counselor Farrell, forgive me. All right, all set. So we are back to the main item as amended, 2/3 vote. If you vote yes or aye, you're voting in favor of the sale of the property with the recommendation of Counselor Albright. Everybody clear on that? Counselor Oliver.
Right, thank you, Mr. President. Our comments still reasonable because I've been sitting on this one for a few minutes. It's not a comment on the amendments, but it's a comment on the.
We are beyond the amendments. We're back to the main item. Comments are entirely appropriate.
Great. Then I have two. The second thing I want to say is that I'm going to reiterate what I said the other night. And my first comment is I'm going to make those comments a lot more civilly than I did the other night. For whatever reason, things got under my skin last Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was. I owe this council a quick apology for that, as well as anyone in the public who didn't appreciate my tone or tenor. My apologies. As for this item, I still think there's a better solution out there. I said this the other night. I'm going to try and say it succinctly here. We should not be selling city land to anyone if we can help it. And I think this time we can. If we take the 1,000 square feet, turn them into whole parking spaces, right? That are attached to this property, we're going to have to rejigger the property lines in order to accommodate that. But do it. That property belongs to One Chestnut. The remaining, and by the way, if there's any, remnant to make a full parking spot, whether that's the second or third, I'm not quite sure how the math works out. Fine. I say we give it to this property. We just give it to them. Gift them the extra couple hundred square feet, whatever that's going to be. And we retain the rest of it. Why? Because like several people have said here tonight, we have a responsibility to support small businesses, not just this one, all of them. The city has a responsibility to all the businesses in West Newton equally. We should retain this property. We should turn these into public parking spaces. They're right next to Hilliard's anyway, or whomever is going to be in this building. Chances are their customers are going to be using these spots anyway. It also resolves the issue of, as Councilor Black has mentioned, the entanglement. Get rid of that. Leasing, I think, was a bad idea. I think if we're going to, if this body, agrees to sell it, fine, sell it. I think that's a bad outcome for the reasons I just stated. I think it's simple. I will be voting no on the main item for that reason. And by the way, it's worth me acknowledging again, I recognize that this is not part of the responsibility of our PR. This is not something this is not an option on the table for us. I recognize that, but we can buck it back to the mayor's office and say, no, I don't think we should be selling this land, but here's something you could do. I think I just basically put that on the record. But anyway.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. Anybody else wish to speak on the main item?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilor Gentile.
I apologize because I know you want to get to a vote, but I think that it's extremely important that we make it clear what we're trying to accomplish with Councilor Albright's recommendation. If this property is sold, then whoever owns the building is also going to have complete ownership of those 8 spaces. So I think that Councilor Albright's intention was to make it clear that if they were to in turn to go ahead and sell the building, that we should make it clear that we want a right of first refusal on those full, complete 8 spaces, not the 69% that we had owned at one time. We don't own it anymore. And like Council Block says, why would we want to go back to that kind of an arrangement? So I just think we need to make it very clear. I mean, Councilor Albright might have also meant that she would like a right of first refusal on both the building and the parking spaces. I don't know. I mean, that's not a bad idea either. But I think we need to get it right. And how, well, you follow what I'm saying?
I do, Counselor Gentile. So I think, Counselor Albright, your motion previously was not just our 2/3 or whatever of those spaces, but all of the spaces. That's the recommendation. Even though we don't own that currently, that would be a condition of the deal. Counselor, I'm going to recognize Counselor Humphrey.
Well, I'm certainly not a land use attorney, but I think that's starting to tread into some eminent domain areas of things. However, I think the intention broadly is not that we would get 2/3 of spaces back again, but that if the property were to go up for sale, we would realize at that point as a city that maybe that's the time to enter into a discussion for the entire parking spaces. So it just sort of is like a tripwire alarm to say, hey, this is going on the market. Do we want to straighten this out, during the next transaction? And at that point, the city might decide to do an eminent domain taking. But I think, we really only have the ability, I think, to say we're talking about making a non-binding recommendation to the mayor regarding the portions of the space that the city currently owns. We don't really have a say on the rest of the adjacent property.
So we are making a non-binding recommendation to the mayor. Counselor Lipoff, did you want to say something here?
Yes, please. I just went along with that, but in my line of business, what I would do, and I think Hilliard's will do it, is that land is going to be recorded as one. It's going to be folded into Hilliard's. There should be no opportunity for the city to get back that strip. If I was Hilliard's, I would go to the registry and that land would be folded in. So when I sold that business in the future sold the property to somebody else in the future, it would come with all of that. So I think this is actually inappropriate and wouldn't work. I don't mind letting it go to the mayor and letting the law department figure it out. But I don't think that's possible what you're asking for.
So thank you, Counselor Lipoff, for that explanation. I think there's an intent here that's been proffered by Counselors Albright and Gentile. I think the intent certainly can go with with our vote. But if, as Counselor Lipoff said, legally that just doesn't make sense, or practically it doesn't make sense, that's going to be up to the mayor with the law department upon due reflection to apply. So I would suggest we proceed as is. There's a recommendation there with the full understanding the recommendation just may not work. Is that understood by everybody? Okay. Let's call the roll on the main item with the recommendation. Remember, a yes or an aye is in favor of sale, requires 16 votes. Go ahead, please.
Counselor Albright. Aye. Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Malachy.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
No, thank you.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 23 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you. Counselor Baker, motion to adjourn. We are adjourned at 9:15 PM. Thank you all very much.